Hi, everybody. This is Brandon with CinemaSlice.com, and we are here, and we have a very special guest today. We have Nick Grant. Nick is the creator of Gutboy, a Badtime Story, which is now on TROMA now.
Yeah, Blu-ray should be coming out sometime in the next couple months. I think it'll be out by the end of August, but I'm not totally sure when.
Well, hello, stranger. Nice fishing rod you've got there.
Oh, it's nothing special. Just how I earn my keep.
I'll trade you $6 for it.
What? No, you can't.
What about your skin?
It's a nasty world.
I earned this corn with every drop of dripping I had.
Dominated by greed.
If you lose one more dog, I will melt you down and sell your bones.
Subjugated by corruption.
Stop, I'm trucking!
And permitted by petty bureaucracy.
I need to know who you are so I can fill out the forms.
And our only hope is this goofy dumbass.
Oh, man. It's so dumb. It's not gonna work. I've tried a lot of different ideas.
Gutboy.
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 I want revenge.
Perfect. We can sneak into his bedroom, raise that hammer, and give him a serious bonk in the face.
I've got one that's way better. Let's drink all his wine.
Hug, how nice to see you. I love your hat.
You learn a lot of things on the ocean floor, like how to please a man.
Hey, on this island, I'm the boss.
No laws out here.
Give me your breath!
What's a daughter?
Nothing illegal, I assure you.
We're supposed to get revenge on him.
Finally come for me!
Hi there!
Oh.
Gutboy.
Whoop.
A Badtime Story.
It doesn't make any sense.
For the viewers at home watching, Gutboy's definitely different. It's one of the more creative films that I've seen in the past 5-10 years, honestly, to come out. I'm a huge fan of marionettes, claymation, all that type of thing. And you mixed in live action as well. It was very interesting to see. I was on TROMA now, and I saw the announcement when the movie was acquired, and I knew I had to watch it. Can you give the viewers at home just a little bit of insight? I know it's kind of complicated with a story like this, but just what it's about.
Yeah, Gutboy is about a poor fisherman who gets tricked out of his skin by a roving capitalist, and then teams up with a bloody mermaid to seek revenge. Along the way, we learn a lot of bizarre details about the town's history and the corruption that has formed the pillars of that society.
It's fantastic. So what was the writing process like for this film? Like when you sat down to put out the first draft of the script, is this the story that you had in mind, or?
Well, I didn't really have a totally solid story in mind. What happened was I was working on another movie about a cult at a ranch because my dad grew up at a ranch, so I have access, and I thought, why not? But it was getting too serious, and it was really difficult, and so I decided to take a break by writing a short socialist indoctrination piece, which became the beginning of Gutboy. And then I liked that world a lot, and so I just started asking questions and coming up with answers, and then it expanded and expanded from there, and eventually we tied up all the loose ends and had a story on our hands.
It's fantastic. Marionettes. I have a background in film. I've made some films, but I never had a chance to work with marionettes, claymation, things like that. What's that process like? Is it more time-consuming as a filmmaker?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we decided to go with marionettes instead of claymation, because claymation is notoriously tedious and long, and we really wanted to be able to translate the spuriousness and excitement of our on-set environment into the piece. And I think that it ends up being a lot livelier than you can really get with claymation because of that, because you're filming stuff happening as it happens. It did have parts that slowed us down. There was a malady that would afflict some of the puppets that we started to call whore's foot, because it happened to the whores in the film very often for whatever reason, where their foots would sort of angle like this. And if you're listening, then I just made an angle. And so sometimes that would have to happen. Sometimes the puppet strings would get tangled and they would have to get restrung. Sometimes we would realize that because of the limitations of puppet anatomy, they weren't able to do some things as scripted, and we would have to pause to figure out what to do. But for the most part, we made up for that in other things that saved us a lot of time. We were able to basically transform a relatively small black box theater into a massive soundstage that we could house 4 or 5 sets at a time on, because everything was at a 1/6 scale. So we were able to relight scenes very quickly, because in order to move a light from one side of the screen to the other, then you just have to walk 3 feet. And so the scale really saved us a lot of time, and probably about as much time as we lost from the difficulties of puppetry.
Okay. Now, is this the first feature that you've ever worked on? Have you, in the past, attempted any features, shorts like that, just for the viewers at home?
This was my first feature. And it was really, I didn't even have a very substantial short before this. I went through film school, so I had a lot of school projects. And I worked with some friends in college on a sketch comedy show called We Did It. And two of the guys from that ended up being actors in Gutboy, voice actors. And one of them was my DP/editor, and one of them was an associate producer. So, like, really the whole team was there, and we were used to working together. But as far as me, features, not before this. This was my first one.
Oh, wow. I guess the question that I have to ask here is light. Like, you brought up lighting. You're able to light the sets very quickly. What process, since everything is 1/6 scale, what process did you have to go through to make sure everything was lit properly?
Well, that was something that was worked out in a lot of detail between our cinematographer and our gaffer. And the nice thing was that because the lights were so easy to move around and we could do things and test them out and stuff, then we actually ended up having a pre-light day for each weekend of shooting. The way we structured the shoot was we shot over 4 weekends. This was just 8 days of principal photography, which is extremely few for a feature. But our producer, my brother, Gabe, is a very efficient, very organized person, and so we were able to get through it all, and part of that process was bringing in the DP and the gaffer before the weekend to go through each of the sets that we were going to shoot that weekend and to come up with a lighting plan and test it beforehand. And I think that saved us a lot of time, and it gave us, like, there's this thing on set if you haven't had a pre-light day where I feel like there's a lot of pressure to keep moving and get the shot because you're always out of time on the shoot day. But having a pre-light day really gave us the time to experiment and play a little bit and let us come up with some stuff that I think looked a lot better than it would have if we had had to worry too much about time while we were lighting as well.
Have you always had an interest in marionettes, puppetry, things like that? When you were in film school, was this something that you knew you wanted to make?
It wasn't really. I took an animation class and did a lot of 2D animation in that, and I really liked it. So animation was always something that was interesting to me, but I also don't like about animation how you can sort of do anything. I think that it's interesting when reality imposes some restrictions on you, but at the same time, I really like writing crazy, surreal stories where all sorts of wacky stuff happens. So, like, either I was going to find some form of animation that was a little more material and a little more restrictive, or I was going to make a $10 million movie. And the latter was out of the question for, other reasons. So we ended up with marionettes.
So the film was made in 2015, and now TROMA picked it up to 2017. So tell me that process of having the film for 2 years and shopping it around. What was that like?
Well, our strategy right when we finished the movie was we need to get it into film festivals, and then everyone's going to write about it and do blogs about it, and then a distributor's going to read that and call us up and be like, I'll give you $10 million. Congratulations, you made it. And that is not how it works, really, especially with a bizarre, more or less unmarketable movie like Gutboy. It's a very strange movie and doesn't fit into holes really well. And so we tried to do that. And we found one film festival that was willing to take a chance on us. And that was Hellsouth Mile in Bay City. And they were really great, super nice folks. We sold out our screening, and it went over really well. But then we were sort of back at square one. So we were pulling our hair out for the longest time trying to figure out what to do, and on a lark, I looked at TROMA's website to see what their submission policy was. Turns out you can just mail in your movie, and they'll take a look at it at least. And we did, and they did, and then a few weeks later they gave us a call. So we were really very lucky that among the first 3 people that we submitted it to, they ended up calling us. But I think that was because we were a good match in the first place.
Absolutely, and TROMA's notorious for just seeing talent, in my opinion. I mean, if you look at everybody that, has gone through that door, Matt Stone, Trey Parker, James Gunn, Jenna Fisher, there was a lot of people that went through TROMA to get their start, and Gutboy is definitely something that I can definitely see doing very well on their platform and through their fan base. The next question I have for you is, after Gutboy got picked up, do you have another project lined up right now that you're working on, or is there something like that you would like to move on to, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I'm in pre-production on a short film that is going to be shooting at the end of this month, and it's going to be pretty cool. Lots of Coney Island stuff. It's called The Sword Swallower, and it's about the freaks of Coney Island and sort of a moral tale of their doings. Aside from that, my brother, who produced Gutboy, and I just produced a short that a friend of ours is doing. My brother's going to direct a short at the end of the year. So we're doing this series of shorts under my company, Rook Productions. And we're going to be putting those out into festivals starting probably early next year. And we are at the same time trying to, we're in deep pre-production on another feature that the DP and editor of Gutboy is shooting in November on the ranch. Not about a cult this time. Well, kind of about a cult. But that's another one. So we got a lot of projects in the works.
What kind of inspirations did you have when you started out becoming a filmmaker? Who did you look to? Like, what was it, a certain film or a certain filmmaker that you saw and you're like, oh, this is what I want to do for a living? Was there any moment that you were like, this is what I want to do?
That came really early for me, actually. My dad was an actor. My dad does a lot of things. He's an actor and a novelist and a preacher and a professor. He's a very impressive man. But anyway, he, when I was a kid, had me on his radio show, the Night Brite Kids Club, and I was Nick, a boy whose father reads him bedtime stories. And I continued acting through middle and high school from that early introduction and was always doing stuff like that. But then I had this really, really great middle school theater teacher, and we all loved her so much. And then we got to high school and we didn't mesh as well with that theater department. And so me and all my friends sort of checked out and were like, what else can we do? My dad had a camera, and so we took it and we started making movies. And really, ever since then, I've been very one track onto movies my whole life.
That's fantastic. Growing up, did you grow up in New York? You said you grew up on a ranch.
Yeah, no, my dad grew up on a ranch. I grew up in Texas, in Dallas. Okay. And I moved to New York about 8 years ago and came out here to make movies because I'm an idiot and didn't realize that movies are actually made in Los Angeles. But I like it a lot more here. And I think that the movies that come out of New York have something special to them that it don't in LA.
The question that I have for you personally is, how is the casting there in New York City? Is it, how's that community of actors? Being from Michigan and trying to cast something in Michigan, it's kind of like you have, the Detroit pool, you have some smaller, acting communities throughout the state. But New York, you kind of feel like it's like a mecca of actors. Like, so if you put out a casting notice, do you have like a thorough casting process? Like for Gutboy, for the voice actors, you said that you had some friends from college, but how was the casting process for that? Was it all people that you knew, or did you put out a notice? Did you do auditions?
We did a casting. We did a full casting, and it was really great. There's an enormous amount of talent in New York because the theater scene here is so enormous. And so you have a lot of people who are like, I feel like kind of the stereotype, or at least a reduction that I'm making from my experience, is that you find a lot of people who went to college for theater and wanted to be theatrical actors and moved to New York and then are sort of feeling like, well, there's so few roles and you really have to be able to sing, but I'm in New York and I really want to be in it. I want to continue acting, and so they sort of start to try out in movies. And that's, I think, the route that a lot of New York film actors go through. And it's nice because the theater takes a different sort of actor, I think, than film does usually. And so I just love New York actors. I feel like they're all like theater people who are in it and like know the plays and are very
absolutely.
very interesting people.
I was just talking to a friend of mine, a producer, and we were just discussing that very thing, like theater actors versus just regular screen actors. And theater actors seem to be really aware of their surroundings, and they project as well, like when they read their lines. Like, you don't have to worry, like, I don't want to just say like they're louder like in their dialogues, but they definitely, like you said, they embody their characters more. Like they feel more comfortable, I think, taking on a different persona than some, screen actors starting out.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting because their technique is like kind of more rigorous because they're required to maintain a stream of thought throughout a scene in a way that film actors aren't really. But it's also kind of more artificial because they do have to have these techniques of projection and like playing it bigger for people who are further away. So it's a trade-off, I think.
So what kind of was there any budgetary concerns? Like, did you have a time frame where it's like, well, we have 8 days to shoot this, that's all the budget will allow, or?
Yeah, so the budget was small, but it was some. We are still in debt 2 years later for Gutboy, and we were paying everyone. Not much, very little, but we were paying everyone. So that meant that we had to pay for every day we were shooting, and so there was a budgetary concern. If we had had more money, I think the only thing we would have done differently is take more time shooting it.
Okay.
If I had had my druthers, we would have been shooting probably like 20 days instead of 8.
Okay. So there's no scenes when you go back and you watch the film all the way through, there's no scenes that you're like, oh, I wish that one came out a little differently.
I wouldn't say that there's anything that I wish was different because I love it, and I think that its imperfections are, testaments to the reality of having made it. And yeah. I don't think it would have been better if it was slicker. I think that adds something to it. That being said, at the time, if I had had more money, there's stuff I would have taken more time on. And there's the Golden Giant sequence is a very long sequence of 2 people in gold body paint wrestling.
And that Golden Giant scene completely threw me off guard. When I first saw it, I was just like, this is amazing. Like I'm just sitting there watching them, and I'm just like, wow, okay, like, you didn't see this one coming at all. Like, so if you want to explain that scene a little bit for the viewers, it hits you. Like, you're just like, whoa, where did this come from?
That scene is a confluence of a lot of things that I really like. First off, I like to say Gutboy is an experimental film because I think it's funny to call Gutboy an experimental film because it's like full of fart jokes. Not little fart jokes, but like figuratively, it's full of fart jokes. And so there is one actual literal experiment I did in the film, which was that Golden Giant sequence. And I always really interested to hear how people reacted to that sequence because it was done with a certain idea in mind. And I don't want to say what the experiment was because I feel like that'll queer the experiment for anyone who's like watching it. But I do want to say that if anyone wants to send me a detailed account of their reaction to that scene as it unfolds, I would love to read it, and I will read it in depth, and thank you.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Especially later on in the film, the wine scene. Mm-hmm. The wine scene where they see the giants, and then, of course, I don't want to dive into too much of the plot, but was that hard to film, the marionettes and the giants together?
We thought it was going to be, but it was actually one of the easiest scenes to shoot, and I think I figured out why. It's because it was on the biggest stage. Everything else was on these very small condensed stages, but because we had humans in this one, we had to build a pretty big area. And being able to move the camera around in that bigger space was a lot more normal, I think, for us. And we didn't feel so, constrained about how we could move. And it was just a blast. I really had a lot of fun filming that scene. There's a montage in it, and there's a lot of jokes in that montage as some of the puppets and the Golden Giants get drunk. And one of them is that one of the Golden Giants is arm wrestling Gutboy, and then Gutboy beats him in the arm wrestling contest. And that was not scripted at all. That was, we were setting up for a different shot, and then our props mistress, Kim Macron, came up to me and was like, Nick, I have a great idea. What if they arm wrestle and Gutboy wins? And I loved it, and it went in there, and it's one of my favorite jokes still. And so, the feeling of collaboration from people coming up with stuff and then saying it, and then like it's hilarious and it goes in the movie, but it's like just a crew member who it's not necessarily their position on paper to come up with that sort of thing. I love that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think especially for me in film, I love ad-libbing or just coming up with ideas on the fly while shooting is you get some of the best ideas that way.
Yeah.
Like you have a script, you have a solid piece of material in front of you, and then while you're in the moment, while you're in the scene, especially when you have a crew that's like, wait, what if we did this differently? And it's like, yeah, that works way better, like let's do something like that. It might be one of my favorite jokes in the film as well, definitely.
Yeah, like doing that collaborative stuff really takes advantage of the medium. Like if you go to film school, I feel like they're always talking about taking advantage of the medium in terms of like editing and cutting and like framing in certain ways and like using time and blah, blah, blah. But like really, there's that cliche that film's a collaborative medium, and it's true, and that's one of its strengths. And if you like actually take that, then that's like a really solid approach to film, I think, that you don't get with like solo arts like writing or painting or whatever,
Oh, absolutely. Now,
like, directing is kind of an act of criticism, like it's almost like it's a critical enterprise as much as it is a creative one, because you're like taking lots of things and collating them and then like deciding how it goes together, and because so many decisions have to be made in the course of a film that it's way too much for any individual to do. So a lot of it becomes selecting things that other people have done, and I think that's great.
Oh, absolutely. So it's also a musical. There's musical numbers in here. We haven't mentioned that part. It's kind of like, but wait, there's more. You know what I mean? To everybody listening, there's more. Trust me with this film. The musical numbers in it. The two questions that I have are, did you write the musical scores to it, and how was it with marionettes to music?
I did not write the musical scores. I wrote the words to everyone except for the two that were like songs, like radio songs. I Want to Lose Control, which is the montage song, and there's another montage where two of the puppets are trying to fit a fish into a pot. And that song was also, I call it a radio song because it's like not character singing. But those are both written by our composer, Cormac Bluestone, who is really very talented composer. He worked on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So he's fantastic, and for some reason he wanted to work on Gutboy with us. And so he did all the composition, and thank God, because I just think it's great. I still can't believe the music every time I hear it.
It was very impressive, definitely. Like the musical numbers, especially when they jump out. And for me, there's no better way to view this than to go into it blind, in my opinion. Like if you just, like I literally just saw the poster, the theatrical poster, and a brief introduction of what it was and went into it, and it was completely enthralled with every element that came out. And I don't think I've watched a film in the past 5 years where like it was like a genre switch almost, you know what I mean? Like there's comedy and then drama and then musical and then live action, but it's all marionettes. Like it's definitely like there's so much aspects to it to digest when you watch it in your first sitting. But with the marionettes, with the music, how was the choreograph? Like was that hard to choreograph?
So that was it depended on the scene. Some of them were easy and some of them were hard, and some of them were like easy because we were lazy. We recorded all of the dialogue and all of the music before we actually shot, and we had a guy on set doing playback, Steve Perpuri, who's a great sound engineer in the Chicago area, but previously of New York. Anyhow, he was doing playback for us, and the whole movie was storyboarded out in a decent amount of detail before we shot, but we ended up changing up some of that for the choreography. The section that I remember choreographing most is the section that's really most like a musical that we call Besto's Plea, when the capitalist is trying to strike a bargain with a group of prostitutes. And for that, that was also a pretty collaborative process. We had Cormac there, and me and Gabe, our producer, and Sean, our DP, and we just went through the song and batted around different ideas for how we could set it up or like how they could be dancing. And Daniel was there too, our lead puppeteer, and we were messing around with the puppets, seeing like, can they actually do a chorus line? What does it look like if they hop up? Because these were also some of the less articulate puppets. They were rod puppets who just have a single rod going into their head, as opposed to the marionettes, which have 7 strings. So that was just a fun process. It really wasn't too stressful of a part.
So yeah, much credit to the puppeteers and everybody who operated it. It looked fantastic. Did you have to scrap anything when you were shooting? Like, okay, this isn't going to work. Anything that just was, okay, this isn't working, we're having difficulties with this puppet, can we change it, like do this? Was there anything that popped up like that during production?
I believe that we did end up scrapping a whole like genre of action, which we should have realized beforehand was impossible, which was puppets picking up things. They can't, of course. If you think about it, how would they? They don't move their fingers. But that was a surprise. And so we ended up having to rewrite a couple scenes around that. And to Daniel's credit, I think that they do pick up things once or twice by drilling a hole through their hand and then attaching a string to the thing, and then a string, the puppeteer pulls the string and carries the object. Anyway, it's complicated and it was difficult, and it is doable. They could have done it for us if we had had more time. But that's something that we ended up cutting and rearranging because of.
More of a personal question. Do you have a specific genre of film that you enjoy more than others? Are you a fan of comedies? Are you a fan of dramas? Like, what type of film do you seek out?
I like a lot of different kinds of movies. I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to like big budget commercial stuff. Like, I don't like Marvel movies and so on, and I always get a lot of shit for that from my friends because I am a snob and it's no good, and I should be able to enjoy those things.
I agree with you. There's so many of them now. Like, there's 9 a year, 10 a year. It's just hard to keep up with. So I'm with you on certain aspects.
I felt vindicated because I went totally apeshit for a huge budget movie a couple of years ago. And that was the new Mad Max.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was... And it's so funny. The guy comes out of retirement and he's like, okay, I'll show you how to make an action movie. You know what I mean? I think he did the original Mad Max, too.
He did do the original Mad Max, and he's really good. George Miller?
But I just love that how he's just like, it's been 40 years, but I'm just going to come out and make a movie. Just give me a budget. And he just comes out and he makes something that it's just like, oh, my God. Who made this? Just...
You know what? He actually did one other one in the meantime, and it was Happy Feet, the Penguin movie.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Who knew?
I don't know. Maybe he's got grandkids and he's just like, I'm gonna make a movie for the kids. Well,
I really like 80s horror movies like Nightmare on Elm Street. I really like Eastern European comedies like Daisies, and I really, really love Andrei Zulawski. He made Possession, a great 80s horror film. He also made Devil, which I think came out in the 70s and is about the devil stalking revolutionary Poland. And he makes movies of such incredible, unbelievable intensity that all the characters spend half their time in contorted poses, dictating very elaborate sentences. And he made the greatest science fiction movie, but it was destroyed by the Polish government. But then the wardrobe mistress saved half of it, and he was so mad he did nothing with it for a long time. And then he eventually went and almost like sarcastically filmed like B-roll in shopping malls and then narrated over the parts that were destroyed of the film. And that's like interspersed with the rest of it. But aside from that, it's like an extraordinarily high budget, complicated, excellent science fiction film that if it were finished would have been like canon for it. It's incredible. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's called On the Silver Globe, and the DVD is coming out soon from Mondo Video.
Fantastic. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of Gutboy. You know, to young filmmakers starting out, especially people that want to deal with marionettes and claymation and stuff like that, do you have advice for budding directors that want to use this type of material to make a film?
Well, like, the nice thing about marionettes is that you can, like, really do anything. And you're probably going to have to try to get the same action over and over a million times. And then in reviewing the footage, you're going to see something small that you hadn't expected and that you didn't see at the time. And that's a really nice thing about it. But overall, just don't expect them to pick things up.
So the film's Gutboy, a Badtime Story. Check it out on TROMA now. Now, go watch it. I'm serious. Check it out. The filmmaker's Nick Grant. Nick, thank you so much for sitting down with CinemaSlice.com and talking to me. And thank you so much. We hope to have you back soon.
Absolutely.
And,
Thanks for having me on.